Good morning, magic players and card collectors of all kinds. And of course, our fans of the pug as well. Gotta give you guys a shout out too. Welcome back to the channel. I was holding the mic up extra close today to start this one off to see if I can make it work better for the intro, but meh, still seems about the same. You'll notice the camera's at a weird angle. That's because I figured we'd get you guys your shot of the pug early in this one. He is enjoying the sun while I have the shades open. Not really supposed to. Ow, smack my foot on the back of the couch there. Not really supposed to have it open for him, but somebody loves the sunshine, so make sure we get it closed though before my brother gets over here to go cut the grass so I don't get shit for heating up the house. The sunlight, but I'm pretty sure it's a dog thing. Most dogs really love to sun themselves. My brother's old dog used to love to sun himself too. And it was a completely different species than Gaiba, so. Anyways, you doing good, buddy? Hmm? You doing good? Hmm? Yeah. Alright, alright, alright. Get you guys some good puggy content there. Maybe somebody will make his way over to us before the end of the video. But if not, at least we got ourselves a shot of the pug. Whoop. What do you know? Making his way over here now. Coming over to get your treat? Coming over to see Daddy? You want to say hi to the YouTube peoples? Yeah? Give them some love too? Yeah? Oh, you're a good boy. Good, good boy. You want to come sit with Daddy while Daddy does the video? Hmm? Would you like that? Just get the other camera on for you guys. There we go. Come here, baby. Move this over a little bit. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come over here. Come here. You're being so stubborn. One, two, three. Woo! Puggy! There's my boy. There's my boy. Beautiful Sunday morning. Sundays are a good day. Yes, it's too hot again today, so we couldn't do the PARK. Very sad. Heat wave is supposed to break tomorrow, though, so Tuesday we can go because I'm on holiday. Lots of leftover Kaiba fluff. It is shedding season for the pug. He's going to go and attack his treat down there below. And in the meantime, while he does that, we can do what we are actually here for, which is Super Deck Sunday. Sunday. That's right, we're back on Super Deck Sunday. I think it's number 13, but I could be wrong. I'll know for sure when I go to do the edit later, but I'm pretty sure we're on 13 today. Which means we've been doing this for a little over 3 months now completely. I'm enjoying doing these deck techs as a special Sunday episode thing for you guys, giving you some insight onto my strategies and how I build things. And I'm hoping you guys are enjoying them too. Today's deck tech was a special selection. Um, I had a few decks ready and I couldn't decide which one I wanted to do. And so I went over to the Discord group that Dr. Angel is running and had a chat with her about it because She put out an amazing 8-hour stream yesterday. If you guys got a chance to see it, great. If you didn't, by all means, I think you should go back and just catch some of the highlights. Um, she dressed up as a character from Expedition 33, um, which was pretty damn good cosplay as far as I'm concerned, minus the French baguette, of course. Really needed that French baguette. Um, but aside from that, they also had some pies in people's faces, which was pretty funny, and lots of games, streaming of like computer games and stuff. So good times. But anyways, between that and just she's been giving me a good positive boost the last week or so, helping me get through to the vacation that I am currently on, which I wasn't 100% sure I was going to make it all the way here some days because it was pretty rough last week. But yeah, pretty stoked. So I offered her the choice of 3 decks, and she chose this one. Um, I will say that this is my vampire deck primarily. There are some other cards in here that aren't vampires, don't get me wrong, but for the most part, it's almost entirely vampire themed. Um, it does produce a lot of tokens. As you can see up here, it does also give the monarchy, which is a fun little thing to play with in the deck. No spoilers from people who already know from the Discord server over there, but we're going to play Mystery Commander today for the rest of us. So I will say it is not the obvious choice. It is going to be red, white, and black. And yes, there is one super obvious, everybody chooses it choice for a vampire deck. And there is a very good reason why he is the absolute obvious choice. I will not say he is a bad choice. Markov is the Edgar Markov is by far the best vampire out there. Period. I just have not had the fortune of pulling a copy, first off. And second off, even if I did pull a copy, there's a really good chance I would still put it in the 99 because I love the commander that I picked for this deck. If nothing else, if worse came to worse, this deck would get some serious changes done because I would make this commander have its own deck instead. If that were the case, if I really wanted to put Edgar Markov in this. But to be honest, like I say, I'm pretty sure, like my Cats deck, where I have a creature that has Eminence in the Cats deck, Edgar Markov would probably end up in the 99. So, interesting thoughts before we head into this. Anyways, we will, as always, start with the lands. I will point out that the themes of this deck are keeping the monarchy in play for sure, getting it in early and bouncing it around and having some fun with it. It's definitely a token heavy deck, and vampires do love to do life loss, life gain. So I like to think of this deck as a pure vampire tribute because if we can't convert you to become a vampire, then we're going to suck you dry. In terms of blood, before anybody clips that and makes it something gross. All right. Let's get into this. Most of the lands I've just gotten here because I like the artwork, but there are a few that are really good ones for this deck. For example, ooh, I do love that old school mountain actually. We'll just zoom in that one. I don't think that's one of the ones that actually counts for anything money-wise, but it's very rare to have some of these older mountains that tap with the actual tap symbol on them. This one's from 95, so pretty cool. I have a few, not very many. I don't think they're all in this deck, but Kaiba has ate a treat and gone back over to the sun. We've got ourselves a command tower because if you don't play a command tower in a deck, you're definitely hindering yourself somewhat, unless you just don't have enough copies of command tower, which is the case for me in a lot of my decks. I basically only have command towers based on the number of precons that I've pulled, and I think I've gotten like 2 or 3 extra copies from La Boutique de Fans when I first started collecting, but beyond that, don't really have that many command towers. There's another land that taps. Another one from 95. Is that the exact same one? I think it is. Yeah. Looks the exact same. Yep, yep, yep. Good stuff. We got ourselves a full art planes. I just really like the artwork on this one. Um, the way the sun's coming through the clouds, it's like that's definitely a vampire's worst nightmare. So having it in black and white seemed really kind of neat as like a dream thing. Voldaren Estate is one of the best vampire lands for sure. Taps for colorless, or you can tap it, pay a life, and add one mana of any color, but you can only use it to cast a vampire. And you can pay 5 and tap this to create a blood token. They cost 1 less for each vampire you control. So as long as you've got 5 vampires on board, you can tap this and make a blood token at will each turn, which is pretty nice. Losing a life to get some color is a little dangerous, but I mean, again, because of the commander being what it is, Path to Ancestry was not actually an option for this deck. And Rogue's Passage is just a super awesome card to throw in this one for the sake of just sometimes you just want to deal a little bit of damage. To be honest, Rogue's Passage actually might get pulled from this deck. And I might put in another land that taps for multiple colors, like maybe I'll put in an Exotic Orchard or something in the near future. I haven't fully decided yet because I only have, I think, maybe 4 copies of Rogue's Passage, and this isn't necessarily a deck that needs it. It's just a deck that I put it in when I originally built it because it was a great idea for the deck at that time. So that is one thing I will say is that is the one card, at least in terms of lands, that is kind of an iffy one. Um, because I don't necessarily need to do combat damage in this deck to successfully win with it. I more so need to just prevent myself from taking too much damage while I gain life through other means and the like. Anyways, let's move on to instance. For instance, we've got Bleed Dry. Just perfect for vampires. I mean, it's totally on flavor. Target creature gets minus 13 until end turn, and when it dies, if it dies, it gets exiled. Rootborn defenses populate, make to populate, you create a token that's a copy of a creature token you already control. So when I have a whole bunch of vampires on the field, it just lets me make 1 extra vampire. But the big thing is all my creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. So this is just a great way to keep myself from getting board wiped. As long as I have a token already in play, I can pretty much protect my board for 3, which is pretty good. Blood Pact, target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. Typically it's going to be me who's drawing, but every now and again, it's nice to do this to an opponent and get the cycle going. Vampire's Vengeance. 2 in a red. This thing deals 2 damage to each non-vampire creature. It will affect some creatures on my board for sure, don't get me wrong, but I chances are most of my vampire creatures at least will survive, obviously, since they're not getting hit. And if I have a decent amount of them on board, I probably might be the only person with creatures on board by the time this carries through. At least because it's going to hit everything for, while it only hits everything for 2 damage, it hits them, it's going to wipe out tokens, and it's going to make things less able to block that turn, which is pretty good. Suffer the Past, X and Black is a fun one to play. Exile X target cards from a player's graveyard, and for each card exiled this way, that player loses a life and I gain a life. So, for anybody who likes stacking their graveyards, this is a great way to deal some damage to them. More so, though, this is about me gaining a bunch of life back, which is pretty good. And at instant speed, I can remove some things from a graveyard to make sure that they can't be targeted by a player on their turn, which is the other reason why I play this. And finally, Offer of Immortality, just giving Death Touch and Indestructible to a creature so that I can keep it on board. There's a decent number of key pieces in this deck that we want to keep in play because of the triggers that they build off of each other, so definitely worth having Offer of Immortality in there. Artifacts, we've got an Arcane Signet. We've got Aeronaut's Wings just to give... it's surprising how many vampires don't actually have flying, which is weird, because lore-wise, vampires have flying, at least in terms of, like, our horror lore in real life. So it always floors me that in Magic there's at least, I would say at least a third to half of the vampires in this deck don't fly on their own, so this just gives me a chance to give them the ability to do so. Loxodon Warhammer, +3/+0, trample and lifelink. Mainly, I'm putting this in the deck for the lifelink. Most of the creatures that I would be equipping this to would not be super powerful even with the +3/+0, but the extra like 4 life or 5 life that I would get each time I swing with them is pretty solid. So, Blood Fountain, when it enters the battlefield, I create a blood token. I pay 3 and a black, tap this, sacrifice it, and return up to 2 target creature cards from my graveyard to my hand. Just a great way to get my commander back, get back another key piece or a couple key pieces before they get exiled by somebody. Um, there's definitely a few things in here that people will want to target and remove as quickly as possible, so this is just a great way to get those things back to my hand. And finally, a Tithing Blade. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent has to sacrifice a creature, which is nice, but the big thing is when I craft it with a creature by paying 4 and a black, I exile a creature that I control or one from my graveyard, and then this thing flips over, and it gives me Consuming Sepulture, which is an artifact that at the beginning of my upkeep, each opponent will lose 1 life and I'll gain a life. So just a great way to get the life gain, life loss cycle triggering at the beginning of each turn, and that's the main reason why I keep that in there. I think these are the sorceries. Nope, those are the enchantments. Okay, I want to do sorceries next, then enchantments, and then creatures. And then we'll see if you guys can guess the commander by then. Feed the Swarm. Destroy target creature or an enchantment an opponent controls. You lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. This is probably one of my favorite sorcery spells in black. Easy to get rid of something that's on the field, and yeah, you're going to take some hits for it, but just another great one. I like this better than Murder and other things like that, to be perfectly honest. I don't really know why, it's just a card I love. Return from Extinction, 1 and a black, choose one. Return target creature from your graveyard to your hand, or return 2 target creatures that share a creature type. So this is a great way for me to get 2 vampires back, or get 1 other creature that isn't a vampire back out of my graveyard if need be. There are no planeswalkers in this deck, but there are 10, maybe, creatures that aren't vampires, maybe 12, something like that. So, um, just a great way to get any piece from the deck back that I want. Pointed Discussion, 2 and a black. You draw 2 cards, you lose 2 life, you create a blood token. The life loss kind of sucks, but there's lots of ways to get the life back, so that's not the biggest deal. Getting 2 cards and a blood token, though, for 3 is pretty decent. So that is definitely one I like to keep in this deck. Vampire's Kiss for the flavor. Target player loses 2 life, you gain 2 life, create 2 blood tokens. Um, yeah, I mean, this deck just had to have a Vampire's Kiss. If it didn't, it would just feel really unflavorful, to be perfectly honest. Exsanguinate is a new one that I recently got. When I got the Foundations kit, I think I got it in there. If not, I pulled it from one of the Foundations packs. Either way, 2 black and X. Each opponent loses X life, and I gain life equal to the total life lost this way. So if each of my opponents loses 3, I end up gaining 9, which is awesome. Again, it just feels really on point with vampires and feels like the perfect flavorful card for this deck, so I had to include it. Fumigate, another one that's insanely awesome from Foundations. 3 and 2 white, destroy all creatures. You gain 1 life for each creature destroyed this way. This is again where if I can get the instant card that lets me populate to go off. Where is that? There it is. Rootborn Defenses. If I can get that to go off in the same turn that I play the Fumigate, I can keep all my creatures, gain life for all the creatures that my opponents lose, and I end up with an extra vampire on top of that. So, I mean, not a shabby combo play there. And Kaya's Wrath, another one. Destroy all creatures, you gain life equal to the total number of creatures you control that were destroyed this way. In this case, I don't want to save my creatures when I play this one, but if I can save a few key pieces, that's great. If not, worst comes to worst, at least I've gained a ton of life and reset the game. That is it for instants and sorceries and artifacts. Now we are on to enchantments. Assemble a Legion is just a great way to get a bunch of tokens onto the battlefield. At the beginning of each upkeep, each of my upkeeps, sorry, I put a muster counter on this thing, and then I create a 1/1 red and white soldier token with haste for each counter on this thing. So this is just one of those cards that's going to get instantly looked at and tried to be removed as quickly as possible by your opponents, because by turn 3 you could have upwards of 6 tokens if you haven't lost any to combat yet. Um, and it's just going to get higher and higher from there. So if you have a way to proliferate, which I do not play proliferate in this deck, you could get these counters up even higher really fast and have even more soldiers coming in. So, but most people don't, know whether you're playing proliferate or not. Black can definitely pull off proliferate. So, and I think white can too, actually. I'm not sure about red. So it's definitely a card that will be looked at by your opponents as a target right away. And ironically, not one of the necessarily most important ones to my deck. So this is one of those red herrings that I like to throw in some decks, where it's giving me a lot of value, but if I lose it, I lose it. It's more there to try and distract people. Blight Mound, same kind of thing here. Attacking pests I control get +1/+0 and have menace. Whenever a non-token creature I control dies, I create a pest. The idea here being, uh, whenever one of my creatures dies, I'm hoping to replace it right away with a pest, plus maybe possibly a vampire or something else too, because I've got a couple other things that give tokens. And so trading off one for multiple is a great value gain, first off. Second off, pests have the ability that when they die, you gain a life. So just another thing where it's going to get the life gain, life loss train going. And people are going to have a lot of problems with that. So again, another piece that people are going to want to try and remove. Necrosynthesis. You enchant a creature for 1 and a black. The enchanted creature has, whenever something else dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it doesn't have to be a creature I control. So basically, going around the board, if other people are losing their creatures too, I'm gaining +1/+1 counters out the wazoo. And when this thing dies, I look at the top X cards in my library, where X is the power of this creature, and I get to put one card into my hand and the rest of the bottom in a random order. So just a really good way to filter through your deck and get one key piece when the creature you equip enchant with this dies, or yeah, it has to die. Yeah, but still, great card. Etchings of the Chosen, 1 white and black. Choose a creature type when this thing comes into play. I'm picking vampires, clearly. Creatures I control of the chosen type get +1/+1. Pay 1, sacrifice a creature of the chosen type. Target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. The best thing about this is I can sacrifice a vampire and protect a non-vampire with this card, which is insanely cool. You would think that this card would make it so that you would have to protect one of the creatures that is of the same type, but it does not. So, while I'm going to pick vampires and give all my vampires a +1/+1, I can then sacrifice, say, 5 vampire tokens and save my commander and a few other key pieces on the board, which is fantastic, as long as I have enough mana open to do so. All Out Assault is just an insanely awesome card that I pulled from Dragons of Tarkir. This is a hollow one, which is extra bonus because, hollows are worth a little bit more financially. This gives all my creatures +1/+1 and Death Touch, regardless of what kind of creature they are, which is fantastic because if you know me and you've been watching this channel for a while, you know that I love Death Touch. So anything where I can give Death Touch to creatures is always something I enjoy putting into a deck. And on top of that, when this thing enters, if it's my main phase, I get an additional combat phase on the turn that I play it, which is crazy. And when I go to attack, I untap all the creatures I control, which is pretty good. Pretty good. So definitely a solid hit on that one when we pulled it. Cradle of Vitality. Whenever you gain life, you can pay 1 and a white. If you do, put +1/+1 counter on target creature for each life you gained. Costs 4 to put into play, but this one is an insanely awesome card for just boosting the crap out of a few of my creatures so that they can swing in for massive amounts of damage simply by gaining a bunch of life in a turn. And I'll gain a bunch of life by playing Exquisite Blood, which is definitely one of those cards that everybody hates and will hit as soon as it hits the table if they possibly can. Because whenever an opponent loses life, I gain that much life. So all these cards that are letting me do little amounts of damage to people are just giving me extra bonus life on top of the life they were already giving me if that's in play. And that actually combos off with a few different things in my deck to make an infinite loop as well. That isn't necessarily the goal of the deck, but if I pull off an infinite loop, I'm not going to complain about it. All right, let's hit some of the non-vampire. We're going to hit the non-vampire creatures first. Sorry, stuttering. Should probably take a drink. It's always a good sign. Take a drink. All right. Anim Pakal, Thousandth Moon. Um, awesome card. 1/2. Whenever I attack with something that is not a gnome, I get to put a +1/+1 counter on this thing, and then create X 1/1 gnomes that are tapped and attacking, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on it. So this is another one of those cards that when it's on the table, it's going to be an instant target that people are going to want to remove. It's going to flood the board with a ton of tokens in 2 or 3 turns, especially if I manage to find ways to put other ways to put +1/+1 counters on it. Like for example, that white enchantment that I showed you earlier. And yeah, I don't have to attack with this, which is the best part. I do not have to actually swing with this card ever. I can always leave this card up as a blocker, not that I'm going to block with it either, but it's just there to do its thing. And again, that just makes it more of a target for people because if I can't remove it through attacking or blocking, then getting it off the field as quickly as possible with an instant or sorcery is their next best bet. And yeah, I don't mind if they get rid of this one necessarily. Another one that I don't mind if they get rid of is Tor Waki the Younger. To be honest, if I get another really good vampire, like if I pulled a Markov, this is probably the card I'd pull out. Not because I don't like this card, I really like this card a lot, but because I actually have a red and black deck that I really want to build where I want to put this card into that deck. But I need something to replace this card with that is worth putting in this deck. And right now, this guy pulls some serious value in this deck because, first off, he has reach, so he's great for the evasive creatures that fly. He also has lifelink, so I'm gaining life whenever I block with him. If another source would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or a player, it deals that much damage +1 instead. So whenever I'm dealing 1 damage to somebody, I'm actually dealing 2. Um, and on top of that, whenever I cast an instant or sorcery spell, this thing deals 2 damage to any target. Now, the reason I want to move this out of the deck also is because there just really isn't a lot of instants and sorceries in this deck. So he's not going to get that second ability off as often as I would like him to, and not nearly as often as he's going to get it off in another deck. But as of right now, as I said, the only thing I might consider putting into this deck is because I came to a realization last night while I was looking through the list of Transformers cards to see how many we were still missing. I came to the realization there's not a lot of Transformers cards. I thought that there were a lot more printed into Brothers War than there were. Apparently there's only 13 total, which is not nearly enough to make a commander deck on their own. So the guy I originally pulled out of this deck, because I wanted to put into a Transformers deck, I'm probably going to put back in here, and that guy was Starscream. So, barring not having an Edgar Markov, I think I would probably put Starscream back into this deck and take out Tor Wookiee when I go to build that red-black deck that I mentioned in the near future, which might happen this week, depending on how efficient I am at deck building. I'm already pretty decently along on the Goblin build, and I've started the Molimo build. It's slowly getting there. But I figure I can have both those done probably by Monday at the latest, Monday night. So I'm going to probably do some updating of a few decks so that I have a few more for Super Deck Sundays. And the rest of the decks, I'm going to, yeah, you get what I'm saying. I'm going to keep building some more decks and we're going to have fun. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to pull this guy and put Starscream back in there. Because even though he's doing a lot of extra damage with regards to the other cards that are in here that are dealing damage, um, the amount of instants and sorceries that are going to be in that red-black deck is going to be quite impressive. So, anyways, continuing on. I'm rambling. Rakdos, Lord of Riots, 2 black, 2 red. You can't cast this spell unless an opponent lost life this turn, so you're casting this in main phase 2, more than likely, but there are ways that you could potentially be casting in main phase 1. It has flying and trample, and creature spells you cast, cost 1 less for each life your opponent's lost this turn. So if you get this guy out fairly early, a lot of the creatures that have, say, for example, Torwaki, who has 3, Pakal has 1, Zergo doesn't have any, there's 1 on the Bloodfist, etc., etc., you're going to be getting some decent value out of this guy for each turn that he's on the board. So he's just another great target for people to want to remove, which again is what I want them to do. I want them to remove as many of the pieces that aren't vampires and leave my vampire core alone, because that vampire core is what's going to win me the game. Zergo Thunder's Decree. I actually put in 3 or 4 different mobilized creatures into this deck, mainly because of the ability to put creatures into play when you attack and sacrifice them afterwards. Now, granted, he actually prevents the tokens from being sacrificed, which means I'm just going to have a lot of tokens on my board when he's out. But if he is not out, the rest of the creatures that give me mobilize are giving me a bunch of creature enter, creature leave effects, which are going to be great for some of the other things that you see in this deck coming up. So while Zergo will protect my tokens and give me a solid board state if he's out, if he's not out, the other guys with Mobilize are doing some fantastic stuff for me as well. Garna Bloodfist of Keld, 1 black and 2 red for 4/3. Whenever another creature you control dies, draw a card if it was attacking. Otherwise, this thing deals 1 damage to each opponent. So this is one of those cards, for example, that goes well with the Torwaki. Whenever one of my tokens dies, if it's not attacking, for example, if it got sacrificed because of Mobilize, that would trigger this, which deals 1 damage, which then deals 2 damage. So it's just a great way to build up the damage. The only downside is I only have 1 Torwaki. And he is actually a lot harder to find. A lot of people seem to like this card. So it's a harder one to find in card shops, at least locally. And I'm still on the not buying from TCG player kick for at least a little while longer. Although I heard that things got resolved fairly well with that situation, I'm still not super happy that everybody had to make a scene essentially in order for um eBay or whoever's in charge of that group to get their heads out of their butts and actually do the right thing. Bone Karen Butcher. Another one with Mobilize. Attacking tokens have Death Touch, so there's just another way to give all my stuff Death Touch, at least all my tokens, which is great. And whenever those tokens happen to die, like I say, that doesn't bother me in the least. He's a 4/4/4, which is pretty stacked. And this is why I don't care if anything leaves the battlefield or comes into the battlefield, because Mirkwood Bats is going to do all the heavy lifting in this deck. This is one of those cards that I actually need to protect to the nth degree, because what this one does is for 3 and a black, I get a 2/3 with flying that says whenever I create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses a life, which again triggers off of Torwaki, giving me 2 life that I'm making everybody lose. Actually, no, I don't think that does trigger off Torwaki. No, because it's damage. Lost life is not damage, so that actually doesn't trigger with Torwaki. Another reason to pull him then. Um, but this one is insane because of all the tokens that, with Mobilize, they come into play on attack. So they'll make everybody lose life when they come into play for the attacks, and when they leave the battlefield for the sacrifice at the end, they're going to lose life again, which is just great. Unless they decide to block the tokens, which means then they're going to have to lose creatures to the Death Touch abilities of my 1 enchantment and my Bone Karen. potentially. Another one that loves to see things come in and out is Ellis Ilcor, Sadistic Pilgrim. One and a black for a 2/2 Phyrexian Core Cleric. He has Death Touch, which is just great because I love Death Touch. And whenever a creature enters the battlefield, I get a life. Whenever a creature leaves the battlefield, I everybody loses life. So he's going to see all the tokens leaving, whether they leave by sacrifice or whether they leave to the being blocked, and people are still going to lose life if he's on the field. So another great one. Voice of Victory. This one is one of those ones where I just don't see if I'm having a hard time deciding whether I'd really swing with it. You don't get the mobilize too if you don't swing with it. But if you do swing with it, while your opponents can't cast spells during your turn, they can definitely block it significantly enough to kill it. Unless you can find a way to, for example, cough, cough, give it flying. In that case, then there's a solid chance it would survive, potentially. But otherwise, Voice of Victory is one of those ones that I expect will die fairly quickly, but while it's out there, people can't cast spells during my turn. That's pretty solid. Nightblade Brigade, Death Touch, awesome. Mobilize 1, even better. And when this thing enters, you surveil 1. So, I mean, you get to filter through your deck. So for 2 and a black, you're getting a lot of value out of this guy. This is one of those ones I'm going to have to put the cards down for a sec because it flips over. He is an insane add to this deck, but a very worthwhile insane add. Flying Lifelink 4/4. When it attacks, each opponent discards a card. And if they can't, I draw a card. Whenever an opponent discards a land in particular, I get to make a black bat token, which will trigger the Mirkwood, which will trigger the Illis Core. And that black bat creature token is a 1/1 with flying. And whenever this thing dies, I return to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control. And it comes back as the Temple of the Dead, which taps to add black, but also I can pay 2 and a black, tap this thing, and transform it again if a player has 1 or fewer cards in hand. But I have to do it at sorcery speed. So essentially, if I can get somebody to discard enough cards, I can tap this thing, pay its cost, bring it back, and I just have this continual bat guy on the field unless he gets exiled or the land gets destroyed. Pretty solid investment in this deck in particular. Again, just triggers well with the Mirkwood Bats, triggers well with the Illis Core. Moonstone Eulogist is my other bat that I put in here that I love. 3 and 2 black. Flying, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you create a blood token, which is fantastic. And whenever you sacrifice an artifact, you get to put +1/+1 counter on this thing and gain a life. So again, that just triggers all my stuff that I want to have going on in this deck. But more importantly, it also triggers the Mirkwood Bats because that's a token I'm sacrificing technically. Um, so just all around, like, good value engine here going. Like, this is what we want to keep in play. Again, the stuff that I've shown before where I'm like, you can get rid of that, you can get rid of that. They're all really valuable stuff that people will need to hit. But if they hit those things, they won't have the stuff they need to hit the things they really need to hit in order to beat me. Kimbo Proliferating Mare is a 1 white and black for a 2/4. Whenever 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield under my opponent's control, for each of them I create a tap token that's a copy of it. So if they put in a golem, I get a golem. If they put in a treasure token, I get a treasure token. But it only happens once per turn. And whenever 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield under my control, each opponent loses a life and I gain a life. So just a great way, again, to get things going in terms of life gain, life loss. That one triggers well with the Exquisite Blood, because then when they all lose a life, I'm also going to gain the 3 life that they lost, plus gain the 1 life off of this, so I'm gaining 4 life while they each lose 1. Pretty solid. Vein Drinker is one of those old school cards from back when I actually played Modern in University. I know that she's not one of the better ones necessarily to put in this deck, but I just love her too much not to include her. First off, the artwork is badass. That is probably one of my favorite vampire artworks in the game. And second off, she's a 4/4 with flying, and you can pay a red, tap her, and basically you do fight before fight actually existed. So she's going to deal damage equal to her power to target creature. That creature is going to deal damage equal to its power to her. If that creature happens to die that she dealt damage to, I get to put a +1/+1 counter on her. So basically, after 3 or 4 turns of doing really petty fights with like 1/1s, you're going to have an 8/8 that you can swing with that has fly. Damn good and solid investment on that one. And we are into the vampire core now. So that was how many cards, I think? I was off by one. 13 cards in this deck are non-vampire. This entire stack here, however, is all vampires. So we got our Vang Drinker, we got our Vampire Nighthawk, Flying Death Touch Lifelink, just a classic auto-include in a vampire deck. Dominating Vampire is another great one to include, for sure. 1 and 2 red, she's a 3/3, and when she enters the battlefield, I get to gain control of target creature with mana value less than or equal to the number of vampires I currently control. I untap that creature and it gets haste until end of turn. Um, while I do have to give that creature back at the end of the turn, I could potentially sacrifice that creature before it goes back, or I swing it at somebody and hopefully they block and kill it. Um, in any case, though, this is pretty cool because chances are I'm going to have at least 3 or 4 vampires in play when I go to play her, hopefully. Acolyte of Alcazatz. Tap, sacrifice another creature or artifact. Each opponent loses a life, I gain a life. It's a 1/4 for 3. Solid investment there. Yahenni, Undying Partisan. I mean, you have to include Yahenni in a vampire deck, don't you? I think you do. It's a 2/2 Aetherborn Vampire Haste. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, I put a +1/+1 counter on this, and I can sacrifice another creature that I control to give this thing indestructible until end of turn. So, just a great creature to keep on board, buff it up, maybe give it some flying, cough, cough, or, some trample and lifelink, cough, cough, and swing out for some big damage. Midnight Assassin, Flying Death Touch. Basically the weaker version of Vampire Nighthawk, but still a solid auto include in this deck because of having at least those first 2 abilities. I would have preferred Flying Lifelink to be honest, but Flying Death Touch is definitely amazing. Vindictive Vampire, 3 and a black for a 2/3. Whenever another creature you control dies, this thing deals 1 damage to each opponent and you gain a life. Again, keeping in mind, all these things trigger off of the guy that I'm actually planning to remove from the deck, which is really funny. But he's sitting over here face down. So I mean, again, like this guy would be doing a whole bunch of extra damage as long as he stays in play with all the different things that are doing doing damage and such. But like I say, I feel like I'm probably going to pull this and put Starscream back in here. Because Starscream, what he does is he gives the Monarchy to somebody you attack. So if I don't get my commander out right away to get Monarchy, per se, hint hint on what the commander is going to be, um, then I have another way to get Monarchy into play in the game fairly early on. And if I remember correctly, he has like Flying and Menace and maybe even 1 or 2 other abilities. Like he's pretty stacked for what he can do. And if you give him enough +1/+1 counters, again, you've got something that has evasion that's swinging for massive damage, which people have to do something about. Butcher of Malik here, I mean, with all the stuff dying in my side of the field, I definitely needed to include this. 5 and 2 black for a 5/4 with flying. Whenever this thing or another creature I control dies, each opponent has to sacrifice a creature. So basically, if I get rid of 2 or 3 vampires, say to Yahenni and to a couple other things, or when my mobilize triggers go off and my creatures get sacrificed at the end of the turn, you're just going to end up sacrificing a whole bunch of stuff too. So Baron Bertram Greywater, 2, a white and a black. Whenever 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, you also make a black vampire rogue creature token with lifelink. Just an insane extra value. So, for example, combines really well with the Assemble of the Legion. And whenever you pay 1 and a black, you can sacrifice another creature or artifact to draw a card. So if you are having a hard time getting resources into your hand, that's a great way to do it. Plus, that'll trigger Illis Core, will trigger the Bat, will trigger Tor Waki, etc., etc., etc. Very comboist deck for not being necessarily one that's designed to actually win on combo specifically. Defiant Bloodlord, 5 and 2 black for 4/5 flying. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. So this one goes really well as a um, infinite combo with the Exquisite Blood. Just finding the Exquisite Blood for you guys to go over that one more time. Here we go. So whenever an opponent loses life, I gain that much life. Whenever I gain life, opponent loses that much life, and it'll just go infinite if I can get both these cards onto the field. Stormkirk Blood Thief, at the beginning of your end step, if an opponent lost life this turn, you get to put +1/+1 counter on target vampire you control, so any of my vampires can get a little bit bigger. And each turn, people are going to be losing life. That is definitely a given in this deck. 2 black for a 2/2 Vampire Shaman, Calistria Highborn. Whenever this creature or another vampire you control dies, you can pay black. If you do, target player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Just another great way to get things going in the cycle. Vampire Socialite, black and red, 2/2. This one has Menace, which is always a nice include on a card. Plus, when it enters the battlefield, if anybody lost life this turn, chances are they have, I get to put +1/+1 counter on every vampire except for this one. And then, on any other turn, well, actually even on the same turn, but on any turn where an opponent lost life, each other vampire I control also enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1. So as long as this guy stays in play, he's buffing every vampire as they come in, and when he comes into play, he's buffering every vampire. So, I mean, huge value on this one. The only sad thing is you can't give +1/+1 counters with its own ability, but there's lots of other ways to do it in this deck, so I'm not too worried. Egger Charm Groom, 2 white and a black for 4/4. Other vampires get +1/+1, classic. And when this thing dies, it comes back to the battlefield under its owner's control as Egger Markov's Coven. So this is the Egger Markov that I have, the cheaper one. Which is an artifact that says at the beginning of your upkeep, you create a white and black creature token with lifelink. It's a vampire, and you put a bloodline counter on this thing. Then if there are 3 or more bloodline counters on this thing, you remove those and you transform it back into Egger. So this is another one of those ones that's just going to keep coming back onto the field as long as you don't exile it or destroy the artifact side of the card. And he's just going to give me more tokens, which will give me more tokens, which will just trigger Illis Core, which will give me more life, which will then trigger, etc., etc., etc. Calvalino, First of the Blessed, 1 black and white, 2/2. Whenever you attack target vampire that isn't a demon becomes a demon in addition to its other types. It gains when this creature dies, draw a card, and create a tapped 4 white black vampire demon creature token with flying, which will then trigger other things. I mean, you're seeing the point of this deck. It just makes an infinitely huge board for itself in the first place. And second off, it's just going to suck the life right out of everybody who's playing against me. Which, if that isn't Vampire on theme, I don't know what is. I even actually pulled out the one card that I originally had in here for a while that I thought was um, a perfect addition to this deck, except for the fact that it was terrible for flavor. It's called Sun Petals Grove, and basically whenever I take combat damage, I put a bunch of counters on this thing, and each upkeep I remove a counter and gain 1 life. So it would just trigger a whole bunch of stuff in the deck, which is insane. But I've decided I'm taking that out, first off, because Sun and Vampires don't go well together, and second off, I want to put that in my Mono White Angels deck when I build that one, so... Vampire Envoy. Flying, when this thing becomes tapped, you gain a life. It's a 2 and a black for a 1/4, so chances are I'm going to attack with it each turn and gain life for attacking with it because of the evasion. Vengeful Blood Witch, 1 and a black. Whenever this creature or another creature you control dies, target opponent loses a life, you gain a life. Classic thing with vampires, wanting to gain life, lose life. Again, all my tokens coming in and out. Just great stuff going on there. Slaughter Specialist, 1 and a black for a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, I give everybody a white human creature token, except for myself. And whenever a creature one of my opponent's controls dies, I put a +1/+1 counter on this thing. So when I start sacrificing all my tokens, if Malakir is out and this is out, this gal is going to get huge off of Malakir's ability to make everybody else sacrifice stuff. Creeping Bloodsucker, 1 and a black for a 1/2 at the beginning of my upkeep. This thing deals 1 damage to each opponent, and I gain life equal to the damage dealt this way, which again, with Exquisite Blood, means I'm going to gain more life, and it's just going to be super awesome. Blood Artist is the classic that you have to include in a vampire deck for sure. 0/1, whenever this thing or another creature dies, target player loses life, you gain a life. Again, you got your Blood Artist, you've got your Vengeful Blood Witch, you've got your Illa's Core, you've got your Bat, you've got basically every time something leaves the battlefield, if I have everything on the field that I want to for this combo to work, I can have people losing upwards of like 6 life, me gaining upwards of 12, and if I have the right card out, that will just infinitely loop until they lose the game. So, I mean, just some crazy, crazy stuff going on in this vampire deck. And the fact that this is actually considered a bracket 2 is nuts. White and black, 2/1, lifelink, and extort. I mean, that one basically I included specifically just because of the extort ability, which is whenever I cast a spell, I can pay white or black. If I do, each opponent loses a life and I gain that much life. So they lose 1 each, I gain 3. Exquisite Blood means when I lose life, I'm going to gain that much life, so I'm going to gain 6, and onward and onward. Whispering Vampire is actually one of the clutch ones that nobody sees coming in this deck. It's actually insane how many triggers this one will get. 2 white and a black for a 2/4. Flying. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses a life, you gain a life. That basically will trigger off of almost half of this deck. I know you like some of the things that I'm leaving face up have a lot more power, but I mean, just to go quickly through it, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, just in what we've seen so far of the vampire stack. Not to mention what was in here and what's left in here. So, I mean, lots of Whisper Drink vampire triggers. Plus, if you pay white, black, and 5, which chances are I don't do very often, but if I did it, creatures I control with power 2 or less gain Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. Basically, I could give all my 1/1/1/2 vampire creature tokens lifelink and death touch until end of turn, swing out, and wipe out somebody's board by paying 5 in white and black. So it's just another way to get a board wipe to go off, basically. Bringer of the Last Gift. I threw this one in here for shits and giggles for the most part, to be perfectly honest. It is a vampire, but it's also a demon. 6 and 2 black for a 6/6 with flying. When this thing enters the battlefield, if you cast it, each player sacrifices all creatures they control. Then each player returns all creatures they from their graveyard that weren't put there this way to the battlefield. So basically, this is like what is that? I think it's Living Death or something like that is the sorcery version of this. But again, like that's going to trigger so many death triggers on my board. It's going to trigger death triggers on everybody else's boards, and then all my stuff's going to come back in, and their stuff's going to come back in, and I'm going to get triggers off that. Basically, if I play this at the right time, I could win the game just by playing this card with the amount of life loss and gain that would happen. Bishop Soldier, 1 and a white for a 2/2 with lifelink. He's just a simple guy doing a simple thing. Attacking people and giving me life for doing it. Twilight Prophet is one of the huge hits in this deck that nobody, well, people will see this one coming, but people will definitely be upset when they see it play too. 2 and 2 black for a 2/4. If you play this at the right time, you're automatically going to ascend. But if not, then you have to wait for the trigger. Essentially, ascend means you have to control 10 permanents. So I mean, just to play this alone, you have to have 4 lands in play, plus this will come into play, which will be 5. So I mean, as long as you have 5 other permanents on the board, you have ascend. And once you have ascend, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have the city's blessing, which is what ascend means, you reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. Then each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the mana value of that card. Beautiful way just to mess with people and get more life gain, life loss stuff going. Amalia Benavides Weir is a 1 black for a 2/2. By the way, again, 2/4, 2/2. Two more triggers off of the Whisper Drink. Bishop Soldier, another 2/2. This one has board pay 3 life, so people have to actually pay 3 additional life to target this thing, which will then trigger some other stuff, potentially. And whenever you gain life, this thing explores. Then you destroy all creatures if its power is exactly 20. So when you explore, you get to look at the top card of your library. If it's not a land, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. If it is a land, it goes into your hand, which is great because then you have more lands to play. Um, the one thing this deck does struggle with somewhat is getting lands onto the field enough so that I actually have the ability to play all my cards. I think there's 33 lands in here. Just gonna do a quick double count. 34 lands, pardon me, and the Arcane Signet. So basically, I have 35 sources of mana, which isn't a lot for a 3-color deck. So I do run into some land screwed issues a lot of the time, but otherwise, not so bad. But yeah, Amalia is insane because it's another one of those things that people will want to remove as quickly as possible because if its power gets to 20, it wipes out the entire board, and then I can swing and basically do half of somebody's life total in one hit. And finally, Marauding Blight Priest, 2 and a black. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses a life. It's just another one that works similarly to the Defiant Bloodlord, in that it's going to create that infinite loop with the Exquisite Blood. Those are the only 2 cards that go infinite with Exquisite Blood, and I do not have a way to get Exquisite Blood back onto the field if it gets destroyed. So that's why I don't consider this a deck that focuses on infinite combos as much as it is a deck that has a combo it wants to run continuously throughout the game, which is I'm going to keep gaining life, you're going to keep losing life slowly, little by little, until all your life is gone. But yeah, that is the deck. Now, for the commander reveal. Question is, did you guess who my commander is? I have given you hints that it is not a vampire, and that it does give me monarchy. What I did not say is it also gives me tokens. And the commander of the day is Queen Marchesa. I actually think this is my favorite commander. Probably well, it's definitely my favorite Mardu commander. And it might be easily within my top 10 favorites of actual commanders that I have. Not necessarily my favorite deck, but in terms of just what the commander does, this is one of my favorites that I've actually built. So she is a 3/3 for 1 red, white, and black. She has Death Touch and Haste, and whenever she enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch automatically. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you are not the Monarch, you get to make an assassin creature token with Death Touch and Haste, which again will trigger and make me a vampire, make me a couple other things. Triggers with Mirkwood Bats, triggers with Illith's Core. Monarchy, for the record, if you have it, means you get to draw a card at the end of your turn, for those of you who don't play Magic. So that's the reason why people want to have Monarchy, which means they're going to attack me to try and get the Monarchy. And when they do, they're going to give me the opening to make the Assassin tokens. Um, Again, just so much stuff going on in this deck, little by little. Um, which is why, again, like, I'm so torn. I really want to get just another copy of this personally to put it into the red and black deck that I want to build, which is why I'm kind of holding off on building that deck currently. If I find one locally, I definitely won't bother pulling this because this is way too good in this deck for what it's doing. But if I can't, because there's so few instants and sorceries in this deck compared to the one I'm planning to build, probably this will get pulled at some point. Anywho, that's all I've got for you today. I will show you guys the token pile, actually, just briefly. I've got the Monarchy token. The Drake doesn't matter. I've got Vampire Demons and Lifelink Vampires up the wazoo. I've got my assassin tokens. I've got a couple white vampires. I got the City Blessing token. That one's supposed to be up here with the monarchy one. I got a couple of warriors for the mobilize triggers. I got the bats, and I got a gnome. Lots of good stuff. Alright, guys, let me know what you think of this deck tech, and I hope you have enjoyed this version of Super Deck Sundays. Sunday. Special shout out once more to Dr. Angel for having picked this commander. Um, kind of leaning towards the idea that it might be fun once a month to let somebody pick a commander deck out of like 3 or 4 different options that I will run for Super Deck Sunday. Snoop, I'm looking at you for the next one. So I'm not going to say when I'm going to give that option because I have to get a bunch of decks updated so I have more options. Right now, I only had 3 options for today. It was either going to be vampires, my sacrifice deck that I've mentioned a couple times because that one got recently updated, and my Sauron Lord of the Rings deck, which really doesn't need much updating. I changed a couple cards in it this morning, but other than that, I don't think I'm going to switch anything in it, so it's pretty good to go. But I would like to update my Galadriel elf deck before I give an option, and I would like to get that blue deck updated and maybe a couple other ones. So maybe in a couple weeks I might throw out the option to you, Snoop, for you to pick one. But in the meantime, in between time, I'm gonna cap it off here. Whoops, shoot. Cap it off here with a beautiful end view of the star of our show and our channel, the hero of my heart, Kaiba the Pug. And I will go to the outro. Much love to you all from Kaiba and I to you. Take care and have a great rest of your weekend, guys. All right.